Hello. हेलो। सकलैन भाई, आपकी आवाज में डिस्टॉर्शन है भाई, बहुत ज्यादा। मतलब मुझे आई लिटरली कैन नॉट अंडरस्टैंड।
Can you hear me, sir?
जी सकलैन भाई, आई कैन हियर यू, यस।
Dr. Faizan, can you hear me, sir? Am I audible?
यस यू आर सकलैन भाई, बिल्कुल आपकी आवाज।
Sorry for unstable internet connection at my end. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to live session on Facebook and YouTube. Today's webinar topic is conducting publishable research in business management. This webinar is supported by SZABIST Research Center, Faculty of Management Sciences, Entrepreneurship and Marketing Research Group. I'm Dr. Saqlain Raza. I'm working as an assistant professor, Entrepreneurship Management at SZABIST Business School, Karachi campus. Now I would like to introduce my guest, Dr. Faizan Ali, Associate Professor at University of Florida, USA. He is author of more than 65 articles with 4,000 plus Google Scholar citations. Prolific research background, and majority of the researchers knows him. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Saklan bhai. I'm humbled and honored for the invitation. Thank you.
And let's start the discussion. Writing an article, it is a matter of appropriate efforts and approach. You know, it's a matter of patience, it's a matter of skills and knowledge. Nobody can deny this fact. Publishing is an important step in your academic career. Once you decide to write on any topic, the most important factor is to how to organize material and methods properly. For this purpose, I invited Dr. Faizan Ali to highlight Everyone is eager to learn, and we really welcome audience question. But first, I'm going to ask the first basic question. Sir, what kind of research can be published?
So Saqlain bhai, this is a very good question. The issue right now is that many people are, many researchers, in fact, they follow in the footsteps of their supervisors. So what the supervisor or whatever the supervisor has been doing, many students just follow that one without looking at so many more avenues that are available for research, right? So we need to first know, when we talk about research, obviously there's all types of research that we have, including applied research, including case studies and things like that. Now, most of us normally go with exploratory or explanatory research, which is like a typical research paper. Even if a student is writing a thesis or dissertation, it's the same format as a paper, right? So you have 5 chapters, you go with introduction, literature, and everything. I would suggest for students to first look into their own interest and see if research is something for them, because it requires a lot of skills. To answer your question specifically, what type of research can be published? So it can be either a very theoretical focused research, which most of the journals publish, or it can be applied research. So applied research is anything that's happening in the industry around us, and you have numerous outlets to publish that research, including magazines, newspapers, industry publications, and things like that. So you don't have to publish all the research you do into academic journals.
Right, sir. Thank you. And secondly, everyone is eager to learn. I already mentioned, and we really welcome audience question. My second question, sir, how can we choose a good topic for our research paper?
So this is a very good question. Again, I would, go back to what I said earlier, that many of our students, PhD students or young researchers, they follow in the footsteps of either their supervisors or the seniors, right? And what happens is, I mean, imagine when Saqlain bhai, you were studying for your own PhD. What happens? You go to your supervisor or even your faculty or department or whatever. They ask you to go and look into research papers, go top tier journals and find some papers from those top tier journals, and then you're going to get a good topic and work on it. The issue with that approach is that most of the papers that are published, even if you go to any journal right now and pick up the latest papers published there, those papers are at least a year old. Like when that research was conducted and when the data was collected and everything, it was a year old. In fact, right now, if we look at the COVID situation, people are publishing a lot on COVID, yet the COVID is not finished yet. So how can we make any conclusions about something which is not even finished, right? So that approach, I feel, is a bit dangerous if we only look at journals to come up with a topic. My suggestion is to look at several other avenues. I will tell you what avenues do I look at, right? So normally what I do is I look at industry magazines. I look at industry shows. I look at social media. I look at blogs. I talk to industry executives. In fact, right before this session, I had a meeting with an industry executive who developed chatbots for businesses. Because I'm conducting a research related to chatbots and I wanted to understand what is the industry's take on this. So I think for a good topic, how can you come up with a good topic? You need to get a mix of relevant things happening around us, which includes, like I said, social media can be a good example, industry magazines can be a good example, blogs can be a good example. And if you allow me, Saqlain bhai, I would want to share my screen just to give you an example of how your own experiences can convert into really good research papers. If you can give me a minute, I can just quickly show you something very quick. Is that okay?
Right. Please, you can share, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay, so Saqlain bhai, right now on the screen, if you look at it, you will see that on this screen there are two photos on the site, right? So there is two photos.
Yes.
I can zoom it a little bit, and you will see that on this photo on the top there are two red circles. These red circles are two mice. I was at an airport in Baltimore, and these are two mice. They were running around in the airport. I was very surprised. Now, what are the mice doing in the lounge of an airport, right? And I'm
Right.
not talking about, a very underdeveloped country or, a third world country or something. It's Baltimore airport, and I was very surprised. Anyways, later I got onto my flight and I had this Muslim meal ordered. And once I got the meal, you would see that on this bread there was a mark of a bite. And I was, again, it was just a shock to me, like, how come this is happening, right? So I got back from this trip and I've been thinking about this. I used this example several times in my marketing class and everything, but then it gave me an idea about research. I was very upset. I was obviously dissatisfied. So I looked into the literature about customer dissatisfaction in airlines, airports, and I couldn't find anything. Most of the literature was saying that if you are less satisfied, then it means you are dissatisfied, which to me doesn't make sense. I mean, you can be less satisfied with something, but it doesn't mean you are dissatisfied with that thing, right? So that gave me an idea, and the idea was then converted into a paper, and that paper was published into one of the best journals in travel and tourism, Journal of Travel Research, right? So this is one example. The other example is this one, in which the paper came out of a news article. So again, the same thing. I got an email from a news magazine. It's an industry magazine called Hotel Management, that talked about how hotel lobbies are transforming into public spaces, focusing on wellness and everything. Obviously, it's a long story, but to cut it short, the idea came from here, which again got published into the #1 hospitality journal called 𝗚𝘀𝗁𝗃, with one of my master's students and two of my colleagues. So I will stop sharing my screen, but these are just examples of how you can convert your own experiences into a good topic, how you can convert something from a news article or a magazine into a good topic. Do not only rely on research papers, at least for the topic. That's what I would say for that. Okay, so I think whoever is watching right now, Dr. Saqlain has some issue with the internet, so I'll continue until Dr. Saqlain comes back. And since the question was about the topic, I would also say that because this webinar is arranged by the Faculty of Management Sciences, and these management sciences people work in management and business management and stuff like that, right? Um, like I was saying, if you over rely on journal articles, then what will happen is that in your circle, you will see that you're publishing on the same topic that many other people are publishing in your area. For instance, in Pakistan these days, I see that, I mean, honestly, from Pakistan, I see that in business management, many of the papers that are being published are in organizational behavior and human resource management. And that surprises me because it's a big country and there's a lot of researchers, but there's an overall majority of people working in human resource management and organizational behavior. I hardly see good research coming out in marketing or in strategic management, or in finance for that matter. For that matter, so I see there's some research being done in econometrics and stuff like that, but not too much as compared to organizational behavior and human resource management. So that only happens when we over rely on one source for topics. I think that's dangerous. Try to explore more stuff around yourself and see what interesting stuff can you come up with for your research. So, Dr. Saqlain, you are back on. So I'm going to stop talking and wait for your question. Then, okay, so again, Dr. Saqlain is down with the internet connection. So another suggestion for all of you is to look into industry relations. So, you know, obviously most of the faculty of management or most of the business schools or management schools have connections to the local businessmen in the area. So I would highly recommend to reach out to them and see what are their problems. What problems do they have that you can solve through your research? Remember that many top tier journals right now, what they do is they want you to have some secondary data and real data from organizations. I'll give you an example. There's a journal called Journal of Service Research, which is one of the best journals in services field, and it is a journal where almost it's a dream of service researchers to publish in there because it's pretty tough to get in there. One of the requirement for that journal is, first of all, they want papers with multiple studies. So if you only collected data one time and you are sending it to that journal, it doesn't work. You must have multiple studies in your paper, and at least one of those studies should be connected to secondary data, real data from one organization. Maybe their profit data about their profitability or their revenues or their sales or customer satisfaction scores or whatever. That cannot be done unless you have any context with organizational people or people from the industry. So try to reach out to them, see what problems do they have, instead of, you know, jumping the bandwagon and just, you know, doing the same thing that has been done before. So that's a good idea. Saqlain bhai, I think you are back up, so maybe we can start with the questions.
Yes, I agree with you, and I suggest to all audience, don't be a copycat regarding your suggesting and proposing research topic or even research title or research article, right? And think differently and write, current prevailing issues. The beauty of a PhD scholar is, the thing is you always involved in creating new knowledge. That's why select latest topic and write on it. Right. Now I'm going to take a question from the audience. Dr. Shaila Najib Qureshi. She has one question. Sir, can you suggest any guidelines of how to publish a paper from literature review?
Yes. Again, a very good question. There's several types of literature reviews, papers, right? So when you're writing your own paper or your own thesis or dissertation, obviously you do literature review. But it doesn't mean that you take your chapter 2 and then send it to a journal and say that, okay, I want to publish this one, it's my literature review. It just doesn't work like that. There are papers that are based entirely on a review of literature, because review of literature is a research method in itself for secondary data. So what you can do is, first of all, think about what type of literature review do you want to do, right? So is it a general review? Is it a systematic literature review? Are you more interested into meta-analysis? Do you want to do bibliometrics? What exactly do you want to do with that literature? So that's number one you need to decide. Now, obviously, all these review types are very different from one another. Most of the people, when they do their dissertations or thesis, most of the students, they do somewhat of a systematic literature review. But if you want to publish a paper, right, if you want to publish a paper out of literature review, then you need to do a systematic literature review properly, right? What it means is that, let's say there's a topic, this very hot topic in Pakistan, everybody is working on it. It's called green human resource management. And I've seen like dozens of paper on this topic coming out from Pakistan. So if you are doing a literature review on green human resource management, then you need to make sure that your review has a proper inclusion and exclusion criteria. Means you need to be able to justify, are you really reviewing all the literature on this topic? And that can be only done if you justify the choice of your journals, which journals that you select, and the choice of the year range. So let's say if you say, I reviewed the papers from 2000 till 2020, why is that, right? Or why did you select particular journals? Those things are very important, because if you don't explain them, then it means your literature review is not all exhaustive. why would anybody care to read that review, right? So that's one thing very important. The other thing, which is the most important right now, is whenever, and this happens 90% of the times with review papers, with literature review papers, that you review the literature, you tell people what is your review of the literature, what has been done, but then that's where the paper stops. Actually, none of the journals are interested in it, especially if you are targeting a good journal. What is more interesting for people is that, okay, we know what is done in the literature, but what next? So the future research suggestions, the future implications is the most important part of a review paper. That actually doesn't come from literature review. That comes from your understanding of the literature. So if anyone here wants to publish a review paper, first of all, I would not recommend you to do it if you are a PhD student. Why? Because you don't understand the field as better as an experienced researcher. So even if you want to do a literature review paper, make sure you work with somebody who really understands the discipline so that you can provide strong future research suggestions. जी सकलैन भाई. Okay. Yes. So Danish, your question is how can we publish critical book review? So first of all, remember that you don't need to criticize everything. Okay. So when you're writing a book review, you don't have to make sure that it's a critical review, right? You can just do a good review, which means an honest review. So if you read a paper, if you read a book, first of all, again, like I said, for PhD students, I don't think it's a good idea to review papers. Look, whenever you review things, it means that you need to be an expert in that field, or you need to understand that field to a good extent, right? Then you can criticize something. What do we mean by criticism? So it's simple. You know something very well, and then somebody else is talking about it. So you need to tell them whether they are saying correct or not very correct, right? You can only do it if you know that field. If you don't know that field, and if you only have read 50, 100 papers in that field, I don't think that you're qualified enough to review something, let alone critical review, right? So for critical review, I think what's important is you need to know the field, and you need to know the positives as well as the negatives. So in critical review, all you need to tell people is whatever is done in that book, is it right or is it not right? If it's right, what are the strong points? If it is not right, what is missing? That's all you need to do in a review. Depending on the book, it can be a critical review. It doesn't have to be a critical review all the time. Okay, so Amreen's question is how to identify suitable journals for a particular paper.
Yes, Dr. Faizan, now I'm going to take...
Ji, sir.
Yes, Dr. Faizan, now I'm going to take another question. Miss Amreen.
Right. So, Saqlain, Dr. Saqlain, this question, I've been asked this question many times, how to identify suitable journals for a particular paper. There's several different methods of finding a suitable journal for a paper. One thing you should know is, the first thing, do not publish in predatory journals. Do not publish in predatory journals. That's number one. Number two is these days there is an increasing trend of publishing in journals that ask you to pay money. Okay, one example of that is MDPI journals, which is sustainability. Most of you may know. Now, what's the problem with that? So yes, maybe some of you might say that, okay, sustainability is not a bad journal. Maybe, I don't know. However, whenever you publish in a journal that requires you to pay money and a lot of money to publish, you always have two types of people about that. So there's a group of researchers that are proponents that say that it's a good business model, it's good, it's fine. But then there's also another group of people that are against it and say that you don't have to pay money to publish your own work, right? It's polarizing. So why do you have to publish in a journal that is having polarizing views in the research community? For business management especially, uh, probably 95% of journals, with an exception of some of the finance journals, any top tier journal, any good standing journal is free to publish in. So that's some important stuff for you to know. Now, how do you find the journal? There's several ways. Your own literature review should do that. Your own literature review should be able to tell you which journals to target. But then I have a detailed video on my YouTube channel that I can post on in the comment section, a link to a video that I did. It's a detailed video on how do you find the journals for your paper for free, right? Free journals, good standing journals. So you can watch it. It explains maybe 8 or 9 different methods that you can use to find suitable journals.
Okay, right. Dr. Faizan, the next question from my side. What do reviewers look for in an original research article?
Okay,
because
so
I know, sorry for interruption. I know people know you are the part of different highly indexed journal editorial board team. That's why I'm asking from you, what do reviewers look for in an original research article?
Right. So so this is again, Saqlain bhai, a very good question. I think we really need to talk about this, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good your paper is. It needs to go to a journal, and the journal editor needs to send it to a reviewer, right? So in many cases, reviewers actually are called as the gatekeepers of the published research, because they really, review. Now, different journals have different forms. So let's say when I'm reviewing for several journals, what happens is they send a form to me, and then I need to fill in that form, and that form has different components, right? So some journals, their forms are very straightforward. They ask you to comment on every section of the paper: introduction, literature, methods, findings, and then implications. But in other cases, you have an open form to write whatever you want to write. So I'll tell you what I look at as a reviewer, right, into papers. And then most of the times, that's exactly what many other people also look at. In my case, the first thing I look at is references. It may shock you, and you'll be like, why in the world would somebody go and look at the references, right? It doesn't make sense. But here's the deal. In many cases, I see that references that people have used in their paper are 5 years old, 6 years old, the latest references I'm saying. So right now, let's say if I'm reviewing a paper in 2021, and 90% of the references are from 2005, 2006, 2007, then that means that your research is not really new. It's talking about something that is already quite old. So that gives me an indication of what's happening. Okay. The second thing that I do is then go and look at the model of the study. So this is what I am talking about myself, right? As a reviewer, what do I do? Then I look at the model. The model gives me a sense of what's happening. Because you look at these different type of constructs in the model, it gives me a sense of what's happening, and then I go and start reviewing the paper. So because that gives me an indication of how new the study is, and how relevant the model is or whatever. Then in the introduction, my first thing that I look at, and first I'll tell you about the major things that I look at, and then the minor things, right? So the major thing is, okay, are you replicating something, or are you bringing in something new, right? So this is very important. It's a major thing. If you are replicating, then there's a different criteria for it. If you are bringing in something new, then there's an entirely different criteria for it to review. So let's go with the new, right? So if you're offering something new, is it new in your field, or is it new throughout? So let's say there might be something new in marketing that you are bringing in from psychology, and it has already been studied in psychology for many years. You are bringing it into marketing. So it's new in the field, right? But not new as a whole. So you need to check that stuff. Now, when you offer something new, how much are you justifying it? Does it make any logic, or the only logic in the paper that you are presenting is nobody has studied it, so I'm studying it? And if that's the only logic, then that doesn't work for saying that nobody has done it, so I'm doing it. Maybe there's a reason why nobody has done it before, right? So just because nobody has done it before and you are doing it doesn't make sense. The lamest logic that there is this study has been done in many other countries, but nobody has studied it in Pakistan, so I'm studying it in Pakistan. That is the lamest logic for any paper. Don't do that, okay? So if you are replicating, let's say even in this situation you are replicating, I think what you need to do is this: talk about the context of the study. So let's say there's a study about service quality of night bars or nightclubs or whatever, okay? And then somebody is telling me that, okay, there's a lot of research on nightclubs in UK and US and Australia and everything, but there's no study in Pakistan, so I want to study it. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? Nobody has done it in Pakistan because there's a reason there's no nightclubs in Pakistan. So how are you going to study that, right? So I think first of all, you need to talk about the context of, you want to do this study. What is the difference between this context? Wherever these studies are done, what is that context? What is this context? And then you need to talk about, is this difference interesting enough to warrant a new study? Right? So is it interesting enough? If it is, then you go ahead and replicate this study or do something about it, and that's fine. So that gap justification, the logic behind that, it's very important for a reviewer. In literature review, so in many cases, the literature review is not only putting together a lot of studies in one paragraph and then thinking of it as a literature review. Your literature review should be more like a story, right? So it should be a logical flow backed up by references. Normally, when I tell my students, I tell them, when you want to write a literature review, you need to think of it like this. Let's say I want to study something about physical environment, okay? Physical environment in services, this is what I want to study. I go to my grandmother. My grandmother doesn't know anything about physical environment in the literature review or in academic world. And then she asks me, okay, explain to me what is physical environment. My grandmom, okay? So what am I going to tell her? I'm going to tell her what is physical environment, right? So I explain to her what is physical environment, what does it mean, how do we think about it, blah, blah, blah. Now, whenever I do this, whenever I talk to my family members, whenever I talk to somebody who doesn't know this field, many times in our conversations, to bring validity, what do? We add references. Even in normal life, obviously you don't say Ali 2020 or Raza 2022. You don't say that in normal conversation. But in normal conversation, right, you don't do that. But in normal conversation, you do bring validity by citing some relevant sources. For instance, you want to talk about religion, okay? When we talk about religion in our country, okay, you want somebody to say something. What do you say? All of a sudden, you would see that somebody is going to cite a reference from the Quran or from the Hadith, or if there's nothing there, then people cite, some Mufti or some Alim, say that, okay, the Alim says like this, the Mufti says like this, Hadith says like, we do that, right? Even in normal conversations. Why? Because every time you cite something, it brings validity to your argument. So when you are writing your literature review, it needs to be like this. It needs to be your narrative about that concept. What do you think about it? But it should be backed by valid references. That's how you need to write your literature review. It shouldn't be like a mix of multiple things. Nobody can make a sense out of what you are writing, right? So that's about your literature review. In your methodology, make sure that when you are writing about your methods, that these are the methods I've used. Also try to justify why are you using these methods. So not only sticking to what you have done, but also to talk about why you have done it. Why is it relevant to use something like that, right? So that's important. Finding analysis, not much. It depends on what you are doing, but be as open as possible to report your findings. Even if you are deleting something, make sure you report it. And then the last section, which again becomes the crux of your study. is your conclusion and implications. So in discussion part, obviously you discuss your findings, right? That's important. So the easiest way to write your discussion, okay, which many people get wrong, is this. So let's say if in your study you have 10 hypotheses, go one by one. Look at your hypothesis number one, is it supported or not? So let's say if your hypothesis number one is supported, you're right that my hypothesis number one is supported, but then go to the literature and say, is your hypothesis supported? Is it similar to previous studies or not? So if in the literature, most of the people also have this hypothesis supported, then you say it's same like previous studies. Not too interesting though. If your hypothesis is not supported and the previous studies are different, right? If your study is contradicting to previous studies, then you have something very interesting on your hand. Unfortunately, many people take this the opposite way. So if your hypotheses are contradicting the previous studies, we are actually scared. Oh, what is going to happen because my hypotheses are non-significant, the previous studies are significant. Don't do that. Actually, if that's the case, you have really a big fish on your hand. That's where you can be creative and say, okay, why do you think your hypothesis is not the same as previous studies? You can bring a lot of discussion from the context of your study, the country where you are conducting the research, your respondents and everything. That's what makes a lot of reviewers really positive towards your paper. So that's where I will stop. Saqlain bhai, it was detailed answer,
Right.
but I thought it was important.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Faizan. Now, next, I'm going to ask the question of everyone. Basically, you use one word, theoretical model. Now I'm going to ask the question of everyone. What is the difference between model and theory?
Okay, so this is a very good question, very, very good question. Now, before I answer this question, I also must say that, there's a lot of terminologies in research that people look at them differently. Okay, it's same like research. One day you go into a newspaper, it says that every day if you eat one apple, it's good for your health. The next day it says every day if you eat apple, it's going to increase your blood sugar, so don't eat apples, right? So something like this. People explain many terminologies in research from their own perspective, right? To me, I'll tell you what is it to me, right? What is the difference between a model and a theory? I'll tell you what does it mean to me. So in Pakistan, when we are building homes, right? Whenever you want to do construction or building homes, you go to an architect or anybody, they make you a map for your home, right? A naqsha jisko hum bolte hain. So they make you that, and then you bring somebody to do DPC.
Exactly.
Right? So the first thing you do is DPC, right? DPC is you do the base, the DPC. Now, when I was little, at that time in my area, there was a lot of construction. So DPCs were always very interesting. They were like 3 feet tall, and you could see, where the walls would be, but you wouldn't see the 3D structure on top of it, right? So theory is like that DPC. Theory is like that map.
Exactly, the building blocks.
The building block, the naqsha, okay? Now, on top of that naqsha, you want to build your home, okay? It's up to you. If you want to put your walls made of glass, made of metal, made of stone, made of bricks, made of wood, whatever you want to make, on top of your DPC, that's up to you. So theory is like DPC, model is like the walls, however you want to do it, right? So that's the easiest difference for you to understand. Now, as an example, there's a theory in psychology that many people use in marketing. It's called SOR, okay? SOR theory or SOR framework, called stimulus organism response, which means that there's a stimulus. That stimulus generates some internal processes like emotions or perceptions, and then as a response, you respond. Response can be approach or avoid. Approach is positive, avoid is negative. This is a theory in psychology. I've used this theory in marketing in several situations. Now, one example is I go to a restaurant, okay? I order food. The food tastes very good. So taste acts as a stimulus which generates emotions in me. So I feel happy because the food is delicious. So food is stimulus, happiness is organism, which is an emotion, and as a response, I go back there again. I go back to the same restaurant again and again, which is loyalty, right? So you apply this model on top of SOR. Now, the same thing can be applied into organizational behavior. You get a raise, your raise is a stimulus that makes you motivated, which is an internal drive as an organism, and as a response, you perform well, which is your performance is a good response, right? So SOR can be applied into organizational behavior as well. So a theory and model works like this.
Right, thank you. Now I'm going to ask another question from the perspective of author. So first I asked from the perspective of reviewer. Now I'm asking from the perspective of author, how to respond reviewer comments as a constructive criticism, sir?
So, you know, it's, I don't think it is the comments from reviewers or anybody. It can be comments from your superiors, your boss, anybody, right? It's about your own personality. So as a researcher, you need to train yourself to understand one thing, and that's the most important thing, that when you get reviews, this is not personal, okay? Unfortunately, many of us, I mean, you know, in Pakistan it happens, but in many other Asian countries it happens the same, right? You think about it, Saqlain bhai, in our social fabric, because we are a collectivist society, right? We live together. It's more of a community-based society. Sometimes, if let's say your friend asks you for a favor, Saqlain bhai, right? Maybe your friend asks you, Saqlain bhai, can I get your car for a minute or for a day or something? And you literally cannot do that, right? And you tell your friend that, sorry, I cannot do that. What is the response to you that you get? Most of the times it's like, chhod yaar, bhai ka dil tod diya. Chhod yaar, kaisa bhai hai. This is what we get, right, as a response. Exactly. So many times we are trained to take things personally, and that thing also comes into research. So when we get a response, a review from reviewers, we don't take it professionally. It means, okay, this is a criticism on my work, not on me, right? The first instinct that kicks in is that, okay, it's criticism on me, not on my work, right? This is what kicks in, and that creates demotivation, negativity, and stuff like this. Now, Saqlain bhai, you are a researcher, you know this, you work with many people, I work with many people. The moment somebody gets a rejection from research papers or a very strong review, a very critical review, what do they say? They start crying, or they start fighting with the reviewer, or
exactly. I agree, sir.
Right? Blame the reviewer, blame the journal, blame the editor, but not blame my own work. So I don't want to blame my work, but I blame the other things. And as a response, what we do is, and you would see this, that as a response, instead, right? As a response, instead of I fix my paper, I suddenly, the next day, I want to send it to another journal, because I still am in the state of denial that, look, my work may have problems, right? So even if I send it to another journal, it may be rejected from there as well, because my paper might have problems, right? So again, I'll tell you how do I deal with this. So first of all, you need to become deep, okay? You need to really become deep, and don't think of it as a personal criticism. It's not. Now, in some cases, of course, look, people are not the same, right? So in some cases, yes, you might have you might have got a really bad reviewer who attacked you personally. And I've seen cases where reviewer might have written that, who asked you to do research, or what type of a researcher are you? You know, yes, that can happen, but maybe it's 1% or 0.5% of the times, not all the time, right? Think of it like this. You get a negative review or a critical review or a rejection, forget about it. Don't read it that day, okay? Leave it alone for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, leave it alone. And then after 2, 3, 4 days, when it's a little bit, you know, okay, it's a bit settled, then read your comments, but read them with an open brain, right? An open heart, and see like, okay, is this doable? Is it not doable? Is it accurate? Is it not accurate? And many times it happens with us. If your paper is rejected, and obviously if you are reading it for the first time on that day, your instinct kicks in and you try to blame the journal and everything. But if you read the same review after 5 days or 6 days or a week, you will see that automatically your brain says, yes, this is wrong with my paper, or yes, I should have done it like this, or I should have done it like that, you know. So leave it for a few days. After a few days, read it point by point, color code them, see which things you can easily do, which things need time, and then decide whether you want to change those things or not. But please, please don't take these type of comments personally. Those are entirely professional comments on your work, not on you. So, okay. How long should the research paper be to publish in journals? So, Myra, your question is a good question. It depends on different journals. So some journals require 6,000 words, some journal requires 8,000 words, some journals require 10,000 words maximum, right? So it's up to the journal and the type of paper you want to send. So some journals even can publish 1,500 words to 2,000 words as far as it's a research note and not a research paper. So the easiest way for your question to be answered is, I don't know what is your research area, or you know, which journal do you want to publish in, but select your journal, go to their homepage and go to author guidelines, and there it should have written very clearly on how long should be your paper or how many words should your paper have.
Right. Another very important question I'm going to ask regarding ethical obligations. So what are the ethical obligations regarding publication?
Very good question. There's so many issues with ethics in
perhaps it is current, perhaps it is hard question of the current times,
It's a very relevant question, and this type of stuff happens everywhere. It's not only in developing countries or Asian countries or Western countries or whatever. It happens everywhere, okay? Because just like any other field, you have good people and not very good people, right? So it's the same in research. Now, something to defend against is that, many people get into unethical things without knowing that it's unethical. That's also something to acknowledge. I think it's a responsibility of universities, supervisors, to really, talk to younger researchers about the ethics of research and the ethics of publishing. So one thing is, when you are publishing, you are a researcher, right? So there's some ethics that apply to you as researcher. Then obviously you are publishing with other researchers, right? So you have a team of researchers, if you have collaborators or whatever. Then there's also ethics that apply to that collaboration or to the co-working, the whole dynamic of co-working with each other. Then in your research, you also have respondents. So there's also an ethical part that involves into that respondent area that I'll talk about very quickly. And then the last thing is you send your paper to a journal. So there's also ethics involved with that, the publishing ethics, right? So there's these 4 different areas. So your personal ethics is obviously things that we all know. Whether you are a researcher or you are not a researcher, there's some ethics that you need to follow. Don't steal. Okay, which is in research, we call it plagiarism. So don't steal other people's work, don't steal other people's ideas. Don't do that. That's completely unethical, right? Don't do that. And I've seen it to a very shameful extent that many people do things that are just not possible. I'll give you an example. Recently, I was guest editing one special issue about service innovation. And then I got one paper related to service robots. Okay, I sent it to one of my friends who is a premium authority on service robots, and he writes a lot. So I sent him this paper to review, and he called me back very upset. He said, "Look, this paper is a complete copy of a book chapter that I recently edited. So just a couple of months before that time, he was doing an edited book on service robots, and there was a chapter in that book. This paper that I received was an exact copy, 97% copy of that chapter. The only difference in all this was, in the book chapter, it talked about robots. Okay, robots. In this paper that I received, robots was changed with service robots. That's the only change in the paper. Nothing else. Nothing else. Not even dot was changed. Everything was the same. This type of things happen. It's personal ethics, right? Don't steal. Even if you are not a researcher, when you are growing up, your parents teach you this, right? Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't lie means, okay, don't claim for something that doesn't belong to you, right? So those are personal ethics, very important. With the group ethics, I think it's very important to know that when you are working with people, everybody's role should be clear. Don't add or remove people without proper consent or talking to everybody. That's very important. Okay. Then if you are asking somebody else to help you, make sure you talk to them beforehand, right? So sometimes it happens to me, somebody sends me a paper and that paper is really bad. So I spend many, many hours to fix this paper for these people. Maybe because of my nature, I don't tell people to add my name on their papers, and I don't like that because I'm not part of that research. But I think it's important that if you reach out to somebody, tell them that, you know, I'm seeking your help. And if you want to invite them as an author, tell them. If you don't, then the best option is that if somebody else helped you with that paper, add their name into acknowledgements. It doesn't cost you anything, but it shows that you're an ethical person, because whoever helps you, their input is in that paper, right? So your paper in its current form is somewhat based on those comments that you are getting. So add it into acknowledgements. Then about your respondents. So about your respondents, I mean, obviously in business management, it may not apply so much, but still, if you are working in organizational behavior or human resource, it does apply there. There are two things that are just very important for respondents. One is, how do you maximize their benefit and how do you minimize their risk? So if you're asking people about their boss or, you know, their relationship with the organization, make sure that that information is very anonymous. You know, it's not passed on to other people. In some countries like our country, there's a big issue of gossip. And many times when you are researching, you go out and interview people, and then those type of things leak out into gossip. Don't do that. Those type of things are just not good. And then lastly, with publishing, make sure that your papers do not indicate your name in any way so that the reviewers know who you are. If the journal is following blind policy, not a good idea. Because, you know, remember that when your paper is accepted in a journal, that's not the end of it. Even now, if you go to, in fact, I can share with you, many journals have some corrections later on, even 5 years, 10 years later, and they retract the papers. If the editor 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road realize that there was some unethical practices involved into your paper, they can retract that paper and that paper will be gone. And in fact, they will keep the first page of that paper on the website with a very big watermark saying it's retracted, which is a very bad spot on your CV and on your research career. So just be sure of these things and don't involve in unethical issues. Saqlain bhai.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Faizan. You well highlighted ethical obligation regarding publication. Now I'm going to take another question from Dr. Mustansir Hayat. He has a question. He want to ask, it is hard to publish article with Pakistani data. What are your views on it?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I think it's one of the best questions today. It's very important to understand this. There's nothing wrong with Pakistani data. What's wrong is that many people don't talk about that data in detail. Okay, just writing one statement or two statements in methodology saying that the data was collected from Pakistan doesn't cut it, right? Especially with the image of Pakistan. And I'm not talking about the negative image of Pakistan. I'm talking about the data not being available in Pakistan in research context, right? And I've been a big proponent of like, do research, but provide more details about that research. My research area is hospitality and tourism. Okay, I work in hospitality and tourism marketing. Interestingly, right now in Pakistan, there are several universities that are offering degrees in hospitality and tourism, right? Um, but the unfortunate thing is that there is not a single PhD in Pakistan with a PhD in hospitality and tourism. Not a single PhD, not even one. Yet we have a lot of degrees that are being offered in hospitality and tourism in Pakistan. Now, first of all, there's not valid data. Now, I get papers to review that are done on tourism in Pakistan or hospitality in Pakistan. And the only thing I see is in methodology saying that the data was collected from hotels in Pakistan. Honestly, if I replace that one statement with the data was collected from hotels in India, it won't change anything in the paper because the entire paper is written generic. It doesn't talk about Pakistan at all. So that is the problem. The problem is not Pakistani data. The problem is how do we write it? That's why earlier I was saying that if you collect data from Pakistan, which I highly, highly recommend doing because the world does not know about the business environment in Pakistan. So if you are studying anything in business management or marketing or whatever, conduct your studies on Pakistan, but your introduction should be strong enough to provide the contextual information about Pakistan. I would highly recommend people, if they're working on hospitality and tourism, let's say, to spend some time, collect some information, write 1 or 2 paragraphs in the introduction to talk about the hospitality industry in Pakistan. What are the issues? And then relate it to your data. So it makes sense. And then coming back to the implications, many times what will happen is that your findings would be different from the mainstream findings from other countries. Even if you compare your findings, and it happened to me several times. I conducted a study on PIA, Pakistan International Airlines. My findings were very unique. I never saw those type of findings. But then when you compare Pakistan PIA with Emirates, then you see what the problem is in the context. So if my findings are contradicting with previous studies, then I explain it in implications. What is the contextual issue? So then people can make sense of it, right? And the paper can become much more attractive. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Faizan. At the end, I have another two important questions. The first question regarding how should we deal with publication rejection, sir?
Yeah. So first of all, rejections can happen for valid reasons and for not so valid reasons. It can your papers can be rejected for really valid reasons, right?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Publication is a matter of patience, as I mentioned earlier.
Very true. Very true. So, Saqlain bhai, the issue with publications is that sometimes it can be rejected for valid reasons. Your paper is not strong enough, the contribution is not enough. There's some severe problems with methodology. So those are valid reasons. Sometimes it's rejected for not so valid reasons. I mean, interestingly, I talk about this on Facebook. I oftentimes put long things on my status, share my views on these type of things. Now, how do you deal with that? Is first of all, like I said earlier, don't take things personally. Okay, don't take things personally. Take it professionally. Now, one thing is in our belief, right? So we also believe that when something bad happens, it opens door for some good stuff. We don't know that, right? So when your paper is rejected, my suggestion is, first of all, don't look at the comments right away. Give it 1 day, 2 days, maybe 3 days, 4 days. After that, open the comments, color code them and see which are the things that you can do, which are the things that will take time. If the comments, even if it takes a month to fix it, and if you feel that those are logical comments, do them, change them, and then send it to another journal. But make sure you do the changes and send it to another journal. Don't just, if it's rejected, send it to another journal. If it's rejected, send it to another journal. It doesn't work like that. Why is that? Is because sometimes the fields are very small. In my career is not really, a long career. I've been in academia since I started my PhD in 2012. I finished in 2015. Now it's 2021. So basically, in academia, since I started reviewing papers, it's almost 5 or 6 years. In this time, it happened to me 6 or 7 times where I have received the same paper from 2 or 3 different journals. Why? Because authors submit it, it's rejected, then they submit it to another journal without making any changes. So it actually reduces your options. So how do you deal with the rejected papers? Read them, make changes, and then submit it to another journal. Don't just directly submit it to another journal.
Okay, and my last question. How can we increase the visibility of published article? It's a war of citation.
Yes.
How can we increase the visibility of published article?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I like this question. So, I think that it's important that you share your studies with other people. Okay. Now, some people do it very shamelessly, and some people don't do it at all. So I think the good thing is to be somewhere in the middle. Don't be in the face of everybody all the time, but don't completely keep quiet about it, right? So first of all, use social media. Okay, use social media as much as possible. As researchers, sometimes I feel that we are using our social media for things that don't really, don't really matter too much. I have seen that many of my friends from developing countries, not even developing, I think from pretty much everywhere, we use social media to preach our political views or our religious views or stuff like that. I've been doing that also. Like I was doing this all the time in the past. Now I don't do it anymore because my own political views and so religious views, those are up to me. I think use your own social media as a marketing platform, as your personal brand, and then start sharing your stuff. Right now, I'm a member of, I don't know, maybe close to 100 groups on Facebook. Some of them are related to qualitative research. Some of them are related to hospitality and tourism. Some of them are related to structural equation modeling. And if I publish a paper relevant to it, I share it in those groups because it increases the visibility. So I think what you should do is this. Use your social media as your personal brand, very important. For most of the researchers, I would highly recommend you to create a profile on LinkedIn, but to keep it updated. Don't create a profile and leave it alone, okay? Create a profile and keep it updated. Share there. LinkedIn has a much more stronger community, because it's a professional platform. So share your stuff there. ResearchGate is a good one. Upload your pre-published copies there so that the readability increases and ultimately it increases your citations. I think that create your Google Scholar profile, but keep it updated again, because Google Scholar adds stuff to your profile that doesn't belong to you. And just because we are so much inclined towards citation, sometimes we keep other people's work with the same surname in our profile because it enhances our citations. Don't do that. I mean, keep it updated, keep it real. And the last thing is that when you publish a paper, it's an academic paper. If you can, I would recommend you to convert your papers into a 500 words or 400 words, simple explanation of what was your research about, and then try to send it to some newspapers in your local area, or magazines, so that they can publish it and more people can read your research. So those are some of the tips I would give you for increasing your visibility. Second, by your voice, Your voice is distorting. I couldn't hear you. Yeah, I just couldn't hear you. Okay, yeah, I couldn't hear you. Earlier I was while we are waiting for Dr. Saqlain, about the visibility. Saqlain bhai, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I just cannot hear you because your voice is really breaking and distorting. So I just couldn't hear you. Okay. While I'm waiting for Dr. Saqlain, there's a question from Sarah Kazi. Is it a myth?
No.
Ji, sir.
Yes, I think. Sorry. Once again, unstable internet connection. Sorry for unstable internet connection at my end. Now I'm going to take the last question. Dr. Sarah Wali Kazi. She is Director, SZABIST Research Center, Faculty of Management Sciences. Her question is it a myth or truth that qualitative research papers are not considered for most publication?
Yeah, it's a look again. It's a very good question. I like it a lot because I serve as associate editor for research methods for a couple of top-tier journals. So many people ask this question. I think it's a myth. There's no reality to it. In fact, there are journals that actually prefer qualitative research. Again, I would say that the question is, what are you contributing with that qualitative research, right? Just because you are interviewing 15 or 20 people, or just because you did a focus group, does not warrant a publication. It's the same with survey methods right now. So many journals don't prefer survey methods unless you complement it with something else, right? So I think the focus should be, what is the contribution of research? And is qualitative research the right approach to answer those questions? If that is the case, you can certainly publish your paper with qualitative research. I just published one paper in Journal of Business Research, probably a month ago or something. And we used the qualitative method. It was called interpretive research approach. And interestingly, we only interviewed 11 people because the concept that we wanted to write about was so new that not many people even knew about it. So only 11 interviews got published in Journal of Business Research. So I think it's about what are you contributing, and if qualitative research is the right method to answer that question, and you should be okay. It's completely a myth. Oh yes, one other thing. Yeah, very quickly. For Dr. Sarah, I think there's another issue with this myth. And even if it's a myth, how is this myth created? So I have a friend from Pakistan, Dr. 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗧 Lodhi. He is in University of Central Punjab now. Maybe some of you might know him. He does a lot of workshops and stuff like this. He's really good at qualitative research methods. So recently he was doing a special issue for us for qualitative research on hospitality and tourism. And many times he was just unable to find reviewers because we don't have a lot of people who are doing qualitative research, right? So when you want to publish a paper with qualitative research, it needs to go to reviewers. Now, just like there's not a lot of qualitative research papers being published, we also don't have a lot of people to review that, right? And what happens is that because of that reason, many qualitative papers go to people who are pure quantitative researchers, and then their reviews are not very positive. Ultimately, those papers don't get accepted. So every time somebody asks me this question, I tell them, the best way for people to bring up qualitative research is to accept invitations to review. The more papers you review based on qualitative research, the more chances you are increasing for your own self to be published later on, because more and more people are going to know about it. That's exactly what happened with PLS SCM. Those of you who know PLS, initially my papers were rejected just because I used PLS SCM, but that was the time when many people didn't know about PLS SCM. So in my case, in hospitality and tourism, I wrote a book on PLS-SEM in hospitality. I wrote several papers on it. I did a lot of workshops on it just to create some sort of an awareness about it. And now things are getting better. So that's what I would suggest, to review also if you are a qualitative researcher. And the more you review, the better it will be.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Faizan. Now I'm going to wrap up this session. I'm highly grateful to Dr. Faizan Ali for joining this session. I really appreciate interest and attention of audience. Thanks all and stay safe.
Saqlain bhai, before we go, just a quick announcement. As you know,
yes,
Saqlain bhai, I see that there were several questions that did not get answered, right? Obviously,
right.
because of the time issue. So one is we can obviously do another session in the future sometime to answer questions.
Right, sir.
Also,
Thank
many
you,
of
sir.
these questions I have answered on my own YouTube channel also. So if anybody is interested in research methods, you can go ahead and watch that. It's called SZABIST on YouTube. There's many free videos there that you can watch.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I will share your YouTube channel link with WhatsApp group of Faculty of Management Sciences. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care. Wa alaikum assalam.